Hang on, I'm just gonna finish this here hand. I've got a good hand here. I'll let you have a peek. See there? See there? What is that? Five aces. Oh, wait. That's the wrong card. Hang on. Let me see what we can do here. All right. Let's see. Oh, that's the wrong card. That's for later. The Fool. Maybe it's in this one. Ah, yeah, here it is. Yep, that's, there we go. Five aces, read 'em and weep, all in. Yep, there we go. Well, today we're playing poker, or are we? I thought I'd be ridiculous because typically I am, but today we're going to talk about when to fold 'em, when to walk away, when to run. Now, that poetic little line actually comes from a song by Kenny Rogers. If you're an American, you probably know it. It's probably known around the world, but less so overseas. But it's about poker and gambling, and really about knowing when to quit, when to get out of a situation. And that's one of these big things. Look at this. I got my headphones all messed up. I was like, something doesn't feel right. What do you do when you are overextended or you're in a situation or the enemy's closing in? How do you survive to fight another day? Because one of the problems that we run into is when people play Kriegsspiel, they tend to go all in, if you will, and then they don't get out. And they end up getting smashed. I saw a situation yesterday where a Prussian unit was about to get smashed by a massive French attack, and they just sat there and they took it. And of course, they simply got wiped out. And that's one of the problems that we have, because a lot of people approach Kriegsspiel as a game, and they don't approach it with the correct mindset, which is you have to imagine that the blocks that you're pushing to the middle of the table are actually living human beings, and you don't want to squander those lives. When you think about that with that mindset, then you are going to make a little bit better choices, even though the choices aren't necessarily the ones you would make when you are playing a game. They are the correct choices you would make when fighting a war, or so I would argue. To help me out with this topic, I'm going to call Eli up. Eli and I have been talking for a few weeks, and I'm inviting him to speak now. And I've been wanting to have him on the show because he is the master of this. And hello, Eli, you there? How's your audio? You good? You there?
Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah,
don't
you're
know if
good.
I can.
You're
Man,
five
I was
by
hoping to have it
five.
on like. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we hear you great. You're good to go.
Oh,
You're good to
perfect.
go. All right. Marvelous Anarchy says, better not have been done in my honor. That's great. Okay. I also called on Achilles, but I don't think Achilles is awake yet. He's, for all I know, he's still jet lagged. And we got Kunstdog down there, who I noticed. And Kunstdog, I think Kuntz was also a Marine as well, and he would be great to hear from at some point. But all of you, we've got Jan here, we got Paul, we have Zindos here. It would be good to hear some of your other perspectives. Anyway, I have a game up. It's not actually a game, it's just a module, so that we can put blocks down and illustrate if we wish to. Anybody who wants to join the module, just come on into the Tabletop Simulator Passwords IKS. All right, let's talk about, let me talk about a situation I had with Eli probably 2-3 years ago now. When we
Oh,
were,
something like that.
yeah, we were still the SoCal Kriegsspiel Society, and Alex McBay had put on a game. It was a Civil War game on my favorite map. It was the Mets map. Actually, I ought to load that. I ought to load the Mets map, because what the heck am I doing not playing on the Mets map, right? Let me load the K22 module because I know it's in there. It's the default map.
Dang, I've
We
played
were,
on that map so many times. I might as well have it down pat.
right? Um, yeah, we were, and you probably remember the game, Eli, but I'll just illustrate for people. Is It was a Civil War scenario on the Mets map, and I was somewhere over here doing Civil War things, but your assignment or your position, maybe I was here on this hill here, I can't remember, but
Oh,
you were.
dang. Do you have like a? I don't know if I can see it. Oh, what a pain.
Oh, well, it's on the YouTube. You know what? I'll see if I can turn on my screen share.
Well, I'm on my phone too. It might just be the way to go and laptop out and do it
Yeah,
that way.
I got my screen share up. But
Oh, okay. Yep. Oh, there it is. It popped up.
all right, so there we are. You were there. I was somewhere else, and we had bad guys right around.
Oh, I think I remember this one.
Yeah, I had selected blue, but they were like here, and your orders were to come out and attack these guys. It was basically to come and sweep these guys, and that was going to be the end of them. And I was waiting for your attack to go in. I think I sent orders and you didn't do it. And ultimately, we lost the scenario, or we lost the battle or whatever. Um, and I was like, Eli, what happened? And you're like, man, I wasn't feeling it. I was like, Eli, I
Well,
gave
I
you
mean,
orders.
I remember it, man. It was. I looked at it and I went, "Oh, that's a bad idea."
Yeah, that's a bad idea. So people understand, and hello to, believe that's Kuntz Dog is here. I'm going to promote you so you can work with things if you want, Kuntz. Raise your hand if you want to come up to the stage and speak. Um, you you're in the Marines, okay? So you're trained. You have military training. Obviously, like any of us, you've read books about warfare and tactics, and you understand probably more than the average Kriegsspiel player about tactics. And in particular, the thing that I associate with you most, Eli, is that you actually have the correct mindset for Kriegsspiel. You play with regard to your men. You think about your men, even though, yes, we're pushing blocks. You think about those blocks as your men, and you take stewardship over them. What the Germans call a field weevil, right? A field wife, a sergeant in the U.S. military. In German, they call it a field wife. And I like that term, field wife or field weevil, because it means you're supposed to take care of your men, you know? Um, and that's what I've seen you do consistently in your play. It does, in my opinion, make you a little overcautious. But I think I'm the one that's wrong in that regard, because when lives are at stake, it pays to be overcautious. And what we consistently see in these games is Kriegspielers, they just push all their units to the middle and then they let it ride. Like they're playing poker and they're just, they've got, ace, king, queen, jack, and then like an eight, which is a terrible hand. You can't do any, it's a losing hand. But they're
Yeah,
hoping at the
it's a
river
nothing.
card that they're going to pull that 10, when really what they
Yeah,
need to
and it
be doing
almost
is,
never happens.
yeah, it almost never happens. What are the odds in actual poker, right? And you need to fold. You need to get out of the game, and if you don't get out of the game, you're going to lose. And anyway, I'll let you kind of talk about this. I think you know what I'm referring to, both in the game that we played with Alex, but I'm interested in how do you process that calculus? What questions do you ask and answer for yourself to determine, one, should I or should I not attack, and two, if I need to get out, I when do I get out? How do you know when to quit? Um, and I understand that in Kriegspiel it's going to be a little different than real life. Real life moves in real time, whereas in Kriegspiel we move in 5, 15, or 20 minutes turns, depending on the scenario. And that does make it harder to react because, well, a lot can happen in 15 minutes on a front line. But
Right, exactly.
there's still a lesson, I think, from training and real life that you should know, that would be applicable to playing a Kriegsspiel scenario. So I'm going to turn it over to you to see what you can share to enlighten us if you're good to go.
Oh, yeah. So you were. I'll actually just start on this because you mentioned the field Webbel, right?
Right.
taking care of your people. So in terms of general officers, which is what the players are going to be most used to, it's like this. No, you cannot avoid going into combat and people dying, right? It's kind of inevitable. However, what are you going to commit them to is basically what it is. Because even in a one-shot, because where a lot of this comes from, I think, it's a one-shot. I mean, don't worry about it. I mean, it's one and done and over with, right?
Yeah, you play one game. It's not a campaign. The losses don't carry over. If you squander all of your units, there's no consequence.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah.
There's nothing's going to happen to you. Well, here's the thing about that. Even in a one-shot, you see, it's really all about what's the most logical move in a one-shot anyway. So in a one-shot, you kind of look at it and go, okay, let's say you plan out, you're just going to go for it on this big attack, right? And, okay, let's say you do carry the position, but now your command's all messed up. What are you going to do after? If they decide to counterattack, you're going to lose it again.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to stop anything because, well, your command is shot to pieces.
Right.
They're tired. You got units missing.
When you play Kriegsspiel, you want to keep a reserve. Just a little pro tip there so that you can be that guy who counterattacks.
Here's the funny thing about that, though. I've played games where I didn't keep a reserve.
Mm-hmm. You were probably,
but it's mainly I was, but it was mainly because I attacked in a way where I didn't think I needed it. A reserve is one of those things where you use it or you keep it when you need it. If you don't feel like you need it, it really comes down to economy of force. Because there are situations where you can't have a reserve because you need that extra punch.
Right. I think we lost Eli. Are you there, Eli? Eli went dark on us. He's still on the stage. There he is. We hear you now.
Yeah. So it really comes down to, like, I get into a role-playing kind of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I even imagine it in my head sometimes. What call would I make if I were in that position?
Right.
What it really comes down to, too, is that, I mean, that really is most of it. I'm just a role player because I look at it and I go, okay, you take care of your men, they'll take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
If your guys look at you and they go, hey, this guy, he's smart, he's effective, he's logical, and he doesn't send us into fights where we all get shot.
Yeah.
So they're going to be more willing to follow you. Mm-hmm. Because they know they're not going to get misused. They don't want to die for nothing any more than the other guy does.
Right. So what calculus do you perform? Maybe let's start by asking in real life. That might be easier.
Okay.
In real life, what calculus do you perform to decide we need to get the hell out of here? Or, well, really, that's the question,
It's funny because I actually use the mindsets and beliefs a little bit of some of the World War I and World War II pilot aces. Mm-hmm. Like the Red Baron, for example, right?
Right.
He didn't get into a fight he can't win. So, and he did it on purpose. So if I'm on the field and I look at a situation like what happened with the scenario you brought up, that's basically what it was. I looked at it and I went, I go in there, I'm not coming out. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't a point in going in.
Right.
Unless my objective in that is to slow down the enemy to get, buy time or whatever else. Unless the sacrifice of those troops has a purpose other than beating the enemy, then there's no point. It doesn't seem logical to me to go into a battle, you're going to lose, or there's a really big chance you might lose, and you do it anyway. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense.
A greater cause,
right? Mm-hmm. Like in a rear guard action, where if you fold, if you get out of there, the whole army's gone. Right. So it's one of those things. Like, okay, we have to stay here now.
Precisely, yeah.
But other than that, if I can't win the fight, I don't go in. Because the only thing that's going to happen is, oh, sure, yeah, we really gave it to him. You can talk all macho and shit. Like, oh, yeah, we gave it to him. But at the end, it's like, well, all my guys are dead for nothing. You know what I mean? And it didn't achieve anything. So there's that end of it where I role play and I actually do care about my troops. Which is just, I do it because it's fun. That's how I think, because I think it's more fun.
Yeah.
But the other end of it is also just pure logic and critical thinking about it. Okay, well, and in a way, you have to kind of combine the two of them. You have to have that general that cares about his troops, but you also have to have that general who thinks about it in terms of math and logic. I mean, it's kind of cold sometimes, to be honest, but you have to.
Yeah.
You have to look at it and go, okay, how many troops am I going to lose if I make that attack? When I'm done, are there going to be enough left over for me to actually hold the position I'm taking?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or will I have enough to pursue if there's nothing coming?
So we have to turn around and translate this real life experience and knowledge into Kriegsspiel. And again, in Kriegsspiel, people take this gameplay approach where there's nothing to lose, but at the same time, people have to understand that the way we judge Kriegsspiel, it's not about who controls the field at the end of the battle, unless it's a campaign. And then if it's a campaign, you have to preserve your force because you may control the field today, but if you squandered your force taking it, what we call a Pyrrhic victory, you're not going to control it tomorrow. So in a regular game, though, you have to approach it with this mindset, this role play mindset that Eli talks about, because that's how we're also going to evaluate your performance in the game and actually choose who the winners are. I think we have kind of gotten away from declaring individual winners in the IKS. We are still declaring, like, this side would win or that side would win, but we also need to continue as umpires to single out players who perform exceptionally well, even if their entire command is wiped out. But that was really the optimum thing for them to do. Maybe they are that rear guard and they actually pull it off and they delay the enemy so that the rest of the army escapes. Well, that guy gets the medal. He's gone. His command is wiped out, but he gets the medal. He's the winner of the event, even if his side lost the battle. And I think it's important. Yeah, go ahead, Eli.
If I may, real quick, there's some real important stuff that kind of goes into that too. There's maneuver is so important. I wish more players would focus on maneuver. If you want to be a good player, good commander, whatever, master maneuver, because that's everything. And you'll see it a lot in a lot of the Kriegsspiel games. It's funny how it happens, because it almost happens like it does in real life. Because troops will go in, they'll make contact, but then they have a hard time getting out if they needed to, which is why maneuver and troop placement is so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's something I want to stress all the time, because it's like, man, and sometimes I'll seem a little conservative to other players until you get me in the fight, because then I'll look at it and go, oh, there's an opportunity. I'll hit you like a hammer. You know what I mean? Or I'll hang back because that's the right call.
Right.
Because to me, I look at it like this too, and kind of a way of thinking about it. There's absolutely no point in sacrificing troops for nothing, like I was saying, but there's also another part. Let the enemy die for their country, I'll live for mine.
There you go.
So it's one of those things where one of your objectives as a commander is to hold on to as many of your troops as you can, while at the same time inflicting maximum casualties on the enemy.
Yeah. A couple months ago, I started a thing called the Tournament of Champions, and it's still ongoing, although I haven't processed a turn in probably 3 or 4 weeks now because of everything else that's been going on in the IKS in real life. We are going to be getting back to that, but in the first scenario, it was called Battle for Prael, which is here. And the purpose of the scenario, one of the big evaluation criteria, by the way, I also have this as a single player scenario attached to the K23 system, or I'm sorry, K-22. It was the first and probably the only single player scenario I've actually produced. But if you have the K-22 system, you can get that and play a single player scenario. But the criteria for that is who stays in and who gets out. It's not who controls Prael at the end of the battle. It's who preserves their force. And in the briefing that I gave to both sides, I told them that you can't afford to suffer more than 30% casualties. If you lose more than a third of your force, then your force will be rendered combat ineffective from the perspective of your commanding officers, and that's a critical fail. And time and again, I only had one or two guys say, you know what, we got up there, the enemy holds the position like this, we can't take it with the force that we have, we're going to back out. I had all these
There's no
people.
point.
Well, exactly. They're going all in. And I had one guy even argue with me. He's like, yeah, well, they still got to make the die roll.
No, they don't. Get out of there.
Exactly. Exactly. You miss the point of the exercise, which is you don't make the die roll at all because
and it's funny because for all those guys that like to just kind of roll the hard six, and just get after it, go in,
Right.
screw it, whatever. Let's see how it goes. I've won. This is for you guys. I've won scenarios. I've won in entire massive Kriegsspiel scenarios just on the fact that my force is still combat effective and the enemy isn't.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. Yeah, because if you're not combat effective, you might as well just be a gaggle of civilians or something. I mean, it's pointless. You're at best a speed bump to the enemy, because they got to round you up.
Your objective, like I was saying, is not to necessarily decisively beat the enemy. Mm-hmm. That's something I think is a carryover from the Total War series and a lot of other video games and such. Look, it doesn't actually happen that way in real life.
It never does. In fact, I think a lot of battles end and both sides will claim victory, part because it's propaganda, but also part because there really is no clear winner. And sometimes the victory can beat up an army so badly that the winning army is also combat ineffective. We saw that at Gettysburg historically, where Lincoln was to Meade. He's like, why aren't you pursuing Lee? And Meade is like, this army is a mess. It is in no shape.
Yeah, I mean, it just spent 3 days fighting out hard. I mean, Gettysburg, you kind of have to look back on it and go, holy crap, 50,000 people died.
Yeah.
So you got to think on how that's going to affect the organization, the morale. I mean, think about all those guys on the line that lost all their buddies. How do you think they're feeling after something like that?
Yeah, and that's not something that we really illustrate. We condense morale down to like a die roll or some other factor, or we fold it in with disruption. And I get that because there is still a practical side to running a game that we're playing for entertainment on a Saturday afternoon, and we've got 4 to 6 hours to get it out. I get that. But at the same time, what you do where you role play, it makes sense. It's why the role play is so cool, because it changes your calculus. And you have to translate this into real life. Just like lessons you learn in Kriegsspiel. I talked to Achilles about this yesterday, and it's on the live stream where I was interviewing him as I was commentating the battle. And he was like, well, there are times when the enemy is going through all of these problems. And when you're commanding, you're focused on how you're having all the problems. And in your mind, the enemy is playing flawlessly. But the reality is they're having just as many problems as you are, if not worse.
Most of the time, yes.
And you could take that into other situations. Let's say you want to ask your boss for a raise. You're like, boss, it's been a couple years since I had a raise. I'm one of your top performers. I need more money if you value me and you want me to keep doing this job. People go in there and they're like, well, what if the boss says, get out, you're not that great, or I don't have it, or whatever. The fact of the matter is your boss is actually terrified of losing you because you are a top performer. People focus on their own fear and they don't realize, wait, my boss is also an emotional existing human being who has his own fears and concerns, and he has bosses. And so if I go in there and I make the ask correctly, if I pick my approach right, he's almost got no choice but to give in and grant it to me, especially if it's a
Exactly.
reasonable request. And
Hmm.
it's that way in everything, whether it's a relationship or a business partnership or anything that you're doing. Kriegsspiel translates over, and that's why I like to emphasize the role play. I love role play because it's fun, but it also helps you to learn about yourself. What kind of a person am I? Some of you guys are downright scary when you role play. Some of you guys, and I don't know if you're being edgy or dark or you're
Well,
exploring. But
I think that really edgy part was shown during the red versus blue campaign for me.
yeah, well, that's exactly it. And I get that though, because when you play a role play campaign, part of the fun is you get to be the bad guy, or you get to play in a way that is totally outside of your character, and that's just fun to do that. But yeah, you have to also use Kriegsspiel as an opportunity to be introspective, to think about yourself. I interviewed a player yesterday, and I won't mention a name, but he was quite passionate, including in the debrief. We were like, "Oh my God, really?" But I remember when I interviewed him, he was a little hot under the collar. He was a little upset, and he was letting it be known. And he had a couple different um, reasons for his upset. But then he said to me, and this is also on the live stream, he's like, I know that I get this way. I know that I can be abrasive or whatever. I don't think that was his exact term, but that's what he meant. Um, and I was like, that's really cool. It's really cool that you're able to play Kriegspiel and learn this about yourself. And that's what puts you on the road to being a better person. So I think
Oh,
that's
agreed.
important. And
Oh,
go ahead.
I do have because you want to know what my calculus is, how I make all these calculations when I'm actually in the game. Okay,
Right, right.
it's way too situational to nail down to certain things. But if you want to do a demo, maybe throw a situation at me on the screen. I could just kind of show you.
Okay, sure, we can do that. So to wrap up, kind of what I was talking about there is, I Kriegspiel has a practical application, and one of the important life skills that you have to learn is when should I stop throwing good money after bad. In business, we call that sunk cost. In Vegas, we call it chasing losses. When are you chasing losses and it's time to get out versus when should you stay in and just hang on? And
Actually, I've got an answer for that question.
well, that is the question. So go for it.
when you're when you are seeing that you're making mistakes and you know you're making mistakes, but you're doing it anyway, that's when you know it's time to get out.
Uh, yeah.
Because then it's no longer a logical calculation, it's an emotional one. Now you have an emotional attachment to getting that particular objective complete.
Okay, I
Now
like that
the thing
because
about emotional
yeah,
decisions is they're not logical decisions.
right. And believe it or not, that's how most people make their everyday decisions. I mean, who actually sits there and runs the calculus or reads the label on the box or counts the calories or thinks about. I mean, a lot of us are really just kind of reacting, reacting, reacting. And we're not stopping
That's
to think before we make a choice. And a lot of times, I mean that's capitalism. That's the heart of capitalism. It's not really, but that's why capitalism flourishes because we're emotional creatures. That's why marketing works. They can use evocative emotional marketing and get us to make an impulse purchase. This is why at the grocery store you have all the candy and the drinks right there by the register. They're hoping that you see that
yeah, I
candy
guess I
bar
want you to apply
and
it
you're like,
before
what,
you
I'm going to
go.
grab that, and it's just an impulse and there's no thought or logic to it. You just walk out and you're like, oh, I've got a Kit Kat. Well, I like Kit Kat, good. And okay, or the kids, will do that. And it's important, I think, to recognize when you're doing that in a game.
And
uh,
it's a skill you can learn too.
right,
It's
right,
like being able to control your emotions and kind of look at it logically. That's a skill you can learn. It's not something that's like, oh, I have emotions. It's impossible to do that. No, it's not impossible to do that. How do you think some of the most successful people in the world got to where they are? They learned to control their emotions.
right, right. And I do think, yeah, that's a big part of it. And as in real life, we have to learn to do the same. And that's why, again, I like Kriegsspiel. It has so many real life practical applications. I put a couple rows of blocks out here. I've got you with 5 blocks on the board, and I have 10 blocks opposing you at about 400 paces, which is actually a fair bit longer than effective musket range. But this unit's closing in, and so in the scenario, if you see that you are outnumbered 2-1 and the enemy is coming at you from the front,
I don't know why you're still standing there.
right? Okay, so you choose to get out. And how do you get out of that, though? What do you do? What order do you issue? Do you just say turn around and flee? Because I think that's going to create panic. Yeah.
No, well, I mean, that and you're going to expose your rear and your flanks, and it's going to turn into a mess. Probably the way to do it, while some systems don't necessarily have, this is where a lot of knowledge and tactics and maneuver comes in. Remember, I was talking about maneuver? This kind of stuff is why. So while it's not necessarily modeled in a lot of systems that we use here at IKS, push out your skirmishers because they're going to be able to slow down the main line.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. It's going to keep them away from you for a little bit to give you a little bit of time. And what you do is you want to angle to the rear. Now, I'm the gray blocks, right?
Yep, you're the gray. So we're going to put some skirmishers out just to indicate that you have skirmishers out about 50 paces or so to the front at least.
Yep. And you're going to want to push them out probably to about 100, 150, maybe 200 paces.
All right. So we'll just say out here. All right.
Yeah. And then what you can do, now again, the whole point of that in this particular case is to keep the enemy skirmishers doing the same thing. It's stopping their main line from making impact with yours. They have to get your skirmishers out of the way in order to shoot volleys. You see what I mean?
Right.
So, which is going to give you a little bit of breathing room and keep them off you. And what you do is you angle. And now, are we facing, is the camera looking north or south?
The camera's looking north.
Okay, then you can angle your withdrawal. You can do an oblique to the rear if you needed to, because you don't want to run your units through what looks like an orchard there behind my left, because it's just going to disorganize your main battle line. If you want to go as an oblique to the rear, which is a movement you can do, and you want to angle away that way, exactly. And then what you can do is you can set up a line. Now, if this is all you have and they're coming at you, you can use that. Well, first, you're going to call for support because you can't win that. Period. It's not going to happen, ever. It's impossible. Right. And then you just go to that tree line up there and put up a little bit of a fight. But even then, if they're coming at you, because you do not want to get locked into an engagement here, you're going to die.
Right. But
so if they're coming at you quick,
you're falling back to better ground. But you're slowing them down, pulling up a roadblock. Yeah.
If they're still coming at you, you still don't want to give them a fight. So you just keep going. And if that means you go down that slope and to the other side with the other ridgeline, do it. But you want to avoid getting massacred here. Now, someone might say, oh my God, that's kind of conservative. Well, these 5 blocks might be crucial in the fight later. Yeah. Plus, see, when you think about it in the RP perspective, how are you going to feel in the morning knowing you got all your guys killed? Right.
I like what you're pointing out, though, with the skirmishers. I think that's really important, is you do, you at a minimum, you leave some kind of a rear guard. But what you just surprised me is you're like, we're going to push some guys forward to slow them down. We're not just going to leave the position, leave a rear guard. We're going to actually push some guys forward to really mess up your attack and make you stop and deal with that before you can resume your steamroll.
Yeah, they have to take care of the skirmishers. They have to get your skirmishers out of the way before they can even make contact with your line. Right. They have to. And that's going to slow down their chance.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's clever and intelligent. A lot of players will just say, get to the rear. They don't leave a rear guard. They certainly don't put out skirmishers, I don't even know if I would. I would probably be one of those guys. I think I would be smart enough to say, we're going to leave a rear guard, but the rest of you get to the rear. I'm pretty sure I've even done that before. Pushing out skirmishers, that's a new trick for me, but that's a good one. What I would tell you, because you made this excellent point, Eli, is that in a lot of systems, it doesn't really model this. Again, when you're moving in 15 or 20-minute turns, and 400 paces is 5 minutes, that's 5, 10, 15. So the way the turn is going to look is on turn one of the example, it's going to look like this. And then on turn 2 of the example, I'm not going to bother with making it pretty. Well, we could.
No, that's fine.
And then
It gets cross.
Right. On turn 2, it's going to look like this. And the reason players don't bother then is because they know that on turn 2, it's going to look like this. I also think they don't bother because they don't know or they don't think. But what I would say is this, is if you are umpiring and a player tells you, I'm going to do what Eli suggests. I'm going to push out skirmishers. I'm going to leave a rear guard, and we're going to fall back. I would suggest that as an umpire, regardless of what your system allows or does not allow or does, model this and flesh it out and say, so that turn 2 does not look like this. Instead, turn 2 looks more like this. And maybe this block then is the price they're going to pay for that. On turn 3, that block will be eliminated, but now you have a more realistic play out of that. And yeah, it might take an extra minute of turn resolution up to that. I don't think it would take that long. But in a case like that, that's where I would allow that minutia because it's just such an important thing. And again, this player is paying a cost. He's paying for it to preserve what he can of his force and get out. And I think that deserves some kind of credit.
The interesting thing about that, too, is that skirmishers being in open order the way they are, and the way these troops will have been trained in being a skirmisher, they would have fallen back with the line regardless. They're not going to sit out there and fight it out. Right. They're actually going to fall back with the line. So you're actually not. It's a really low cost scenario. You just kind of throw, okay, well, I'm going to put my skirmishers down, slow them down. Now you might lose a few guys, but it's going to be nothing compared to your entire battle line. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about this too is that you can even, and this is kind of where we get into a little bit of advanced stuff. Now, if you want to do the tricky plays, the really kind of creative plays, that's like I'm going to keep stressing it because it really is that important. Maneuver, master maneuver, learn how bodies of troops move. Mm-hmm. Because in this particular situation, depending on where my reinforcements are coming up, I know they're going to keep chasing me. So I might even maneuver them into a position where when the reinforcements do arrive, they hit them where it hurts.
Right. So you might be falling back to here even. Oh, look at that. See, you keep getting routed. And I've foolishly pursued you here. My reinforcements are back here somewhere. But all of a sudden, out of left field, you've got, a division or something coming up from the right. And now, boom, I'm the one who's in trouble.
And now, when your flank starts to turn, because now you have to, now I can take my small force and go back on attack.
Yep.
Which means now you're going to get hit from two sides. Which means it went from you being the aggressor, the guy that and actually, I'm just going to draw the parallel. It goes from you being the aggressor, the guy that wanted to go all in and really chase down this small body of troops because he got blood up. He's like, I'm going after him. Well, now he just got beat to nothing because he just got hit from two sides because he foolishly went after him without thinking.
Yeah. There you go. Wolfton, you had your hand raised. I wanted to give you a chance to speak. If you want to, just pop on up. Let's see if he wants to come up here.
Well, if he's got some input, I want to hear it.
Yeah, me too. He might have had a question or something too. I don't know. He'll pop up here if he wants to. I want to go ahead and open up to the rest of the group also. If you guys have any questions or comments or input, Wolfton's here. So go ahead, Wolfton, and the rest of you raise your request to speak, and I'll pull you up, and you can follow Wolfton. Go ahead, Wolfton.
Right. You guys touched on this a bit, but I feel like ego plays a big part of kind of why you attack or why you withdraw as well. Are you attacking this position because the enemy is here and you don't want the enemy to be here anymore? And are you not withdrawing because the enemy is in front of you and you don't want to give up your position just because you want to stick it to the enemy? And so you kind of have to think of, all right, why do I want to stay here? And then why do I want to attack? And I feel like it's an important thought process that is sometimes done, but can be a critical mistake when it's not done.
I'm in agreement with that, and that would really be kind of situational. Like, want to know, Marshall, why did those guys try to attack my small line?
Yeah, well, they had orders, let's say, to attack your line to drive you off.
Okay.
Blue wants that position. They want that ground. Okay.
Well, they probably just, he's got a point too. I mean, they probably just stop. And if that's the case, I just sit tight, wait for the reinforcements to come up, and then I join the battle line and go in with them.
Right. And yeah, it's important to understand, especially when people play games, we get our pride and our ego caught up, like Wolfton put out, and we end up making these emotional decisions. And I think that needs to be part of your OODA loop, part of your decision-making process. Am I doing this because it promotes the objective of my army or because I have an order to do so? Or am I doing this because I have an emotional reason to do so? I can't stand the thought of maybe losing or something.
And sometimes there are situations, and it kind of touches on the scenario that Marshall brought up earlier. It's okay to say no. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, let's say I get an order from the CIC, and he goes, hey, attack that. And there's a bunch of guns up there. You know what I mean? And I know if I march out in front of that gun line, I'm going to get slaughtered.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I'm going to look at the general and go, I'm not doing that attack. I'll be straight up with him.
Yeah.
But it's not only because I care about my troops. It's because he's going to need those troops. So he's making a dumb decision that I know is going to bite him later. So it's like, I don't know, man. I'm not making that attack. I'll be honest with you. Now, if you're going to allow me to kind of attack it at a different angle, okay, that's different. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going across that field right into the gun line.
Yeah. It is situational. But yeah, there are times when you have to just go back at your commander and say, are you sure? Because it's probably not a good idea. So yeah, there we have it. It is interesting to consider, I feel, these different situations, knowing when to get out, how to get out. And I think what we distill down to is, if you're making emotional decisions, you need to stop, arrest your thinking, and reset your OODA loop, if you will, which is your decision-making process.
Yep.
And make the right decision. Make sure that you're making the correct decision, and that you're not being pushed by fundamentals, calculus.
Well,
your gut.
Emotions are fine. I know that, but sometimes I let them loose. I know there's been more than a few games where I knew I had myself set up right.
Yeah.
I knew they were coming in the way I wanted them to. So I just kind of looked at it and went, okay, I've got the advantage. And I just let the emotions have it.
Right.
And I went in there full bore and just said, okay, I've got the advantage. I know I'm going to win this particular fight. Mm-hmm. So why not?
Yeah, but you're supported by the calculus. And in that case, the calculus and the emotions are in line. Where a lot of times people just have the emotion, but they don't have the calculus. And there's the problem, And a lot of times people don't have the data. They don't have the information to perform the calculus. That's another problem.
Well, that's kind of where I can go into a little bit on what my study has been through the years. Mm-hmm. So the things I focused on, and it kind of ties in, again, master maneuver, because then you're going to know how troops move, where to move them, how to come up with an order of march, how to maneuver entire commands through a small space. Because then once you understand how maneuver works, when you understand how bodies of troops work, you're going to have a much better time of it. And part of the reason why I was able to think of those skirmishers is because I understand how the tactics work all the way down to the regimental battalion level.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you go.
That's what my study has been. And then I kind of hybridized it with a lot of study of, there's even some things that I kind of bring into Napoleonic warfare that weren't done at the period. Things like modern maneuver warfare.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These days, I prefer a very mobile force. I don't like to get tied down.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of reasons for that aren't really relevant to this discussion. But the main thing is master maneuver, learn your tactics all the way down to the battalion level. Learn them so well you can call them offhand.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, even if you're not going to make those kind of decisions, you understand how it works at that level. Kind of like how Longstreet, he served on the ranks on up.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he was such a tactical genius, because he understood the ins and outs of everything.
Yeah.
And then you hybridize that with your own study of strategy. And it's more than just kind of regurgitating all the stuff that you learn in the history books. You really have to look at it. I even did this one time. I looked at it and I drew it out on a map, on an image. I had Photoshop up and I was drawing out lines of maneuver.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at a situation and I went, oh, that's why he did that. It wasn't just looking at it and going, okay, yeah, I mean, that seemed like the right call. Or, oh, yeah, he's just doing a double envelopment. No. I looked at it and I looked at their maneuvers and how they moved their troops around. And then it hit me. You see what I mean? So you really kind of have to get really creative with your study and know the ins and outs of your job. Because even though it's a game, mm-hmm. when you're the player, you have to think of it as, my job is the general right now. What does the general need to know to make this go right?
Right. Yeah. So there you go. And I like how, really behind what you just told me is you need the data to perform the calculus. And the data comes from knowing how units move, looking at the terrain. What's the enemy moving through? What is he doing with? That's all data points that you use to perform calculus. None of that is emotional. That's very black or white, yes or no, and yeah, that's what you want to be doing when you're making these decisions. It is time for us to wrap up today, but I wanted to thank you, Eli, for being on here. I'd also like to thank you, Wolfton, for coming up and sharing some commentary with us, and for everyone who's being here today. Eli, it was a treat to have you on. I hope you'll come on again soon.
Oh, always, man. I mean, I could go on and on. I've got so much stuff rattling around in my head over the years that I've just learned. You know what I mean? So if there's ever a time you just want to, because there were times I've even considered doing a big course just to basically teach people what I know. Mm-hmm. And if there's anything ever that you want to talk about, feel free, man.
You got it. All right, everybody. Well, that's our show for today. If you have any feedback or anything, you can always put comments on the YouTube, or you can just bring it up in the Discord chat or whatever. And that's what we got. Remember, in 1 week, we have Grand Waterloo on Saturday. It's going to be an incredible event. I hope you can all be there and participate in some way. We do need umpires.
I'll be the Prince of Orange. Yeah, I'm Prince of Orange in First Corps.
There you go. Well, good luck, Eli. So, thank you all for being here, and we will see you all on our next adventure. Bye for now.